Hey everybody, it's Dana. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and blog. Today we're going to be making a Christmas card using this beautiful string of lights stamp set from Technique Tuesday. I'm going to share with you how to make lights all the way across your card, even if the stamp you have is not long enough. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm placing everything in my MISTI because this is going to allow me to make sure that I have all my lights in the places where I want them. Now you can do this with an acrylic block, but I just prefer to use my MISTI because it allows me to get perfect placement. Now I'm going to start with the lights off on the top of my card panel. I am using watercolor paper today because we're going to be using some zig markers. My ink of choice is the blackout ink from Ink on 3. This has become one of my go-to black inks. Now, because this paper is watercolor paper and it has some texture to it, I need to make sure that I stamp this twice just to make sure that my lines are nice and crisp. I'm going to go ahead and press that down. And you see, I'm not pressing too hard. I'm just kind of like tapping. Next, I'm going to grab myself a sheet of acetate. And this is actually the acetate from the packaging. This is going to allow me to line up my next set of lights without actually placing it down, without having to move anything, my cardstock. I just place my lights right on top of that acetate. And then I can move that piece of acetate anywhere I want it on this page to get it to line up where I want it. Now I just close my MISTI lid. I can remove that acetate and now I can stamp my image. Now you can use this acetate trick with any stamp you want, just so you get the right layout of your image without getting any of the smudge marks or not knowing exactly where your image is going to be. Now I double stamp that again. Now I'm going to move on to get those lights to run off the page. I'm going to remove that little L corner and I want my lights to continue off. So I'm just putting down that acetate one more time, picking up that stamp off my MISTI lid and lining up the strings. Now, if you are a little bit off on lining up the strings, don't worry about that. You can fix that a little bit later with a fine tip pen. Now I can go ahead and remove that acetate and I can continue to stamp the string of lights. Now this image is going to run off of my MISTI, but it's not going to damage anything. I'm going to be just fine. The stamp is not going to be harmed in any way. Now again, this is watercolor cardstock, so I need to make sure that I double stamp everything I'm stamping today because I don't want to have to worry about fixing this later with a pen, even though you can do that. So if you end up stamping something that's a fine line and you don't get it stamped correctly, you can go ahead and continuously color and then you can come back in later and fix it with the pen. All right, now I'm going to grab that acetate one more time, place it towards the bottom of my card, peel up those lights, place it right down on the acetate. And now, as you can see, I have a string of lights over my card, even though the stamp was not long enough to achieve that one-time stamping. All right, I have it where I want, and I'll just repeat the process. Now, this image is available over on the Technique Tuesday shop, so make sure you guys swing by and grab this. And again, I'm just going to press down. And now I have these beautiful lights across this card. I really love the simplicity of these lights, and you're going to see how easy they are to color. Now, since we have everything done, I have my cute little lights, we're going to go ahead and start coloring. Now, like I said, I'm going to be using some zig markers. I picked out all the colors of the rainbow on this. So I'm going to start with my red into my yellow, my orange rather, my yellow, my green, my blue, my purple, and my pink. Now, when I use zig markers, I like to use an acrylic block and a very fine paintbrush, especially if I'm doing detailed work. Now, I like to wet my paper first. So I'm going to put down the colorant, my Zig color, and I'm going to zoom in so you guys can kind of see this a little bit closer. And I'm going to scribble that off on my acrylic block first. I'm not taking that color directly to my paper. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to wet my paper first. This to me just helps me achieve a more watercolor look compared to me bringing it directly to the paper. Now I can pick up some of the coloring right off that acrylic block and I can bring it into my little lights. Now this brush here I purchased from Ink on 3. It's a tiny little travel brush, and this brush has become one of my favorite brushes when I'm doing watercolor on really detailed images. And I like it because it's compact. I can close it down and take it with me when I'm traveling. Next, I'm going to come in with the orange. And again, I'm just going to do this in rainbow color. I come in first with a little bit of water. And I'm not using a lot of water. I'm just using just enough to get the water down on my paper, but I'm not doing it where it's saturating my paper. A little bit of water is going to go a long way when you're using this technique. So I come back in, I just grab a little bit, and then I'm just kind of putting in a little bit of a shadow because I want my image to look a little bit rounded, because obviously that's what our light bulbs would be. They would be rounded. All right, next I'm going to come in with the yellow and I'm going to scribble that down again on my acrylic block. Now this color is a little bit lighter, so I took the water directly to the acrylic block to bring in that yellow. This is just going to provide me with a color variation that is going to be nice and strong like the rest of the colors I'm using on here. So that's why I did it that way. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to color all of these little images up and get all the color down across the paper. Now I will show you in this little section here, I did scoot over one color. So as you can see, I started with the orange, and this is going to provide me the opportunity to get in that purple and pink that I did not get in on the first row. So if you're going to do this, just make sure you shift over one color to make sure that you can get all of those pretty colors across your card. Now I'm adding in those depths, those colors that I said I laid down just to give myself a little shadow. I'm coming in directly with my Zig marker on this. So I'm not coming from the acrylic block. I bring in my Zig marker, I go directly to that light bulb, and then I will blend out the color with some clean water. And this helps me just to get that little shadow and that roundness on my light bulbs. Now, doesn't this look too precious? This is all done, but before I go on to anything else, I do want to dry this back a little bit. Now, I did not use a lot of water on this, but I just want to make sure that this is dry and I don't like stick my hand in it and I smudge color anywhere. So I'm just going to heat set this just for a few seconds just to make sure that panel is nice and dry. Next, I want to add a little bit of shimmer. So I'm coming in with my Spectrum Noir shimmer pen, and this is in the clear color. And I'm going to add in just a little bit of shimmer to these before I go on to my next step. Now, anytime you use these pens on watercolor, you are going to get a little bit of that color on the tip of this pen, but do not panic. All you need to do is get yourself a scratch piece of paper and just wipe off that color. Now, I choose to always color everything at once. So all my oranges at one time, all my greens at one time, all my yellows at one time. And this just ensures that I don't end up mixing the colors together. So as you can see, I'm going to all my oranges, and then I would go to all my yellows, just so I don't end up mistakenly going into another color and then I get mud on my card. So I'm just going to finish that up. And now, since our light bulbs are done and they're looking all cute, I do want to add one more step to this, just one more. Now, before I do that step, I do want to make sure that I stamp my sentiment at this time, because otherwise it's not going to work. So I'm just going to grab one of the sentiments outside of this cute little pack, and there's several of them for you to choose to use. I'm going to choose this one here, Have a Tangle-Free Holiday, because I know every year my husband kind of fights with our lights, the lights that we put outside the house. So I'm wishing him a tangle-free Christmas, even though every year we put the lights up and we think they're not tangled. By the time they come back out of the attic, they are tangled. So I'm giving him this card. So I'm just going to press that down. Again, I'm on watercolor paper. So I'm going to stamp this sentiment twice. And the way I lined up my lights gave me a perfect area for me to go ahead and place in that sentiment. Now on to the fun part. The fun part is getting the card all together. So I do want to use my little sand eraser just to go into some of the areas where I might have went outside with my paint. And this sand eraser is perfect for cleaning up just a tiny bit of smudges that you might have had. And it doesn't really damage the card, but it just kind of gives away those pesky little areas. And really, everything that's handmade might have a boo-boo or two in there, but that's the best part. It's handmade. So I'm just cleaning up these little bit of areas where I might have went outside the line. And now we can go ahead and add the color to our strings. Now, I wanted to make sure that this pops, and you can't see it that well here on camera, but I did go over the top of the light bulb with a W0 marker. And I also went around the light bulbs. And this just kind of makes my light bulbs kind of pop off my paper a little bit, and they don't look flat. So this is a great technique just to add a little bit of shading on your card, just to make it look like it's popping off the paper. All right, now since I finished that up, and as you can see, I'm going all the way around my cute little light bulbs, my card, as far as the coloring part, is complete. Now, I really wish you can see this better, but the camera is not allowing me to, but it looks fantastic. All right, now we need to go ahead and put the card together. I am using Nina White 110-pound cardstock, and I'm not even going to trim this down. I really want this panel to go all the way across my card front. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and trim it down with a fancy like stitch die or just a another type of die to make this a little bit smaller than your card panel. But for me, I wanted it to take up all the way across the card panel. Now I am going to temporarily just tape my card closed just so I can get this lined up as close as I can. So I'm using my fingers just to press this into the side of the fold part first before I bring it over to the rest of my card. And that kind of secures that I don't get it too wonky. Now, to make my light bulbs really look like light bulbs, I'm adding some clear crystal drops from Nuvo. And I'm going to go around all of the light bulbs. Now, you want this to be your last step because obviously that's going to be wet and it's going to need some time to dry. So anytime you're using this, just make sure it's your last step. I'm just filling in that last purple one. Now, this is going to have to set aside to dry, but my card is now complete. Alrighty, so we have some beautiful shimmery light bulbs on our cute little card today. And I'm going to bring this up so you can really see the crystal on this. So you can see that they really look like light bulbs. Now, it's going to be wet for a while. So just like I said, put this aside to dry. Do not touch it. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you want to see some more coloring by me, go ahead and click on this link above. I will see you guys very soon in another video. Bye-bye, everybody.